The Polaroids in the walls, they were halfway through the kitchen demo in their Kentucky farmhouse when the hammer broke through drywall and kissed cardboard. Inside, a shoebox, edges furred with dust, rubber band fossilized to a crack. Polaroids hunderslid, out like a deck of sleeping faces. Every room in the house, every decade of wallpaper. Families caught mid-dream, mouths slack, hands folded. Blankets creased the way real nights creased them. "Creeper lived here," the contractor said, trying a laugh that didn't land. He flipped one over, on the back, in blocky pencil. Master, 1979. Another. Boys' room, 1994. The dog curled at the foot of the bed, a ghost even then. They kept going until the stacks stuttered into the present. The wallpaper matched. The crib matched. Their rug, the coffee ring, the stupid lamp they'd argued about, and then one that shouldn't exist. Both of them asleep in their new bed, her drooling on his shoulder like always. On the back, Master, 3 weeks. "Who took this?" she asked, but the question came out breathless, like she was asking from under a sheet. "Someone had a key," he said. He wanted it to be that simple so badly it made his eyes water. They ran the house like a drill lock's attic, crawl space, vents until they found the second box behind the nursery wall. Deeper in, wrapped in a trash bag like it was meant to keep breathing. These Polaroids weren't of people. They were of the empty rooms themselves, taken at the same angles as the sleepers, at the same times, noted on the backs. 2:13 a.m. Las 4:06 a.m. 3:01 a.m. The rooms looked a hair off ceilings too low, windows too narrow, as if the camera had swallowed an inch of space before spitting out the picture. "This is sick," he said, but his voice was already shrinking. A draft threaded the studs. The nursery monitor ticked on in the dark, then off, then on again, even unplugged. They hadn't put the baby down yet, they wouldn't. Not now, so the crib stood clean as a plate. Still, the monitor chimed. Motion detected. They started. The crib on the screen was empty, then not empty, then subtly wrong. The spindles bowed inward, like something heavy leaned out. A hand too long at the palm, too short at the fingers tapped to the rail and left a chalky crescent. A chateau made the mobile spin backward. Her phone buzzed. New message. No number. A photo came through. A Polaroid of the kitchen, mid-renovation mess. Both of them bent over a shoebox. The composition matched the photos on the floor exactly, like an echo laid over the present. On the back, a note typed into the message field in a neat, impossible font. Open the last wall. They shouldn't have, but they did. Behind the stud bay in the hall, tucked where no one could reach without first deciding to, sat a third box smaller, heavier. Inside, only 6 photos. Each one showed the same hallway. This hallway, but closer each time. The camera stepping forward. The baseboard, the outlet, the hairline crack, they joked, looked like a river. The last photo was nothing but the paint, close enough to see brush hairs. "Okay," he said hoarsely. "We're leaving." They headed for the door and stopped. The foyer wall, smooth that morning, now had a new seam. A rectangle of patches, feathered with fresh mud. The contractor hadn't done that. They hadn't done that. From inside the wall came the soft skitter of paper sliding against paper, like a thick deck being shuffled by careful hands. "Who's there?" she asked, because something in her insisted it would answer. It did, in its way. Another photo slid out under the baseboard and tapped her shoe. She bent, shaking, and turned it over. Their bedroom. Tonight, the bed empty. On the back, Master, 2:28 a.m. She checked the stove clock. 2:23. 5 minutes yawned like a mouth. They didn't run then. Then, they froze, and in that pause the house did the rest. The nursery door swung an inch and stopped. The monitor chimed again, cheerful as a microwave. The mobile turned once, twice, backwards. Somewhere between studs, the rustle of more photos moving forward, patient as breath. "Don't go to sleep," he said. Grabbing keys a risk. Grabbing anything that felt like a living edge. But we're not. She started, and then she saw the final. Polaroid in the small box, the one they'd missed, stuck to the lid. The two of them standing in the foyer looking down at a photo at their feet. Same clothes. Same fear. On the back, in the same blocky pencil that had labeled 1979. Awake. Under it, faintly, pressed so hard the letters dented the paper. Someone had added a second word in a different hand. For now, the man under the bed by the third night, in the Nevada roadside motel. The stink was sweet and drug-thick, like fruit rotting under heat. He'd kept the AC on full blast, stuffed towels in the bathroom drain, lit a match till his fingers burned. Still, the smell pressed close, warm as someone's breath. He called the front desk at 2:14 a.m. "Something died in here," he said. The clerk apologetic. Sleepy promised to send someone in the morning. He hung up and lay staring at the popcorn ceiling. While the bed springs made a tiny settling sound, the kind that says, "You're not alone." At 3:01, the smell sharpened. Copper under sugar. He slid to the floor with his phone light and checked the trash. The mini fridge, even the AC filter, gagging at the gray paste. Finally, dizzy and angry, he crouched and angled the light under the bed. The bed frame wasn't hollow. It was a box base, upholstered. But the fabric was bowed. Something inside it pushed outward and left a dark thumbprint. He swallowed, throat clicking. His light caught a seam poorly stapled, a strip of wood pried, and then jammed back. He backed away and called again. Okay, the clerk said, voice tight now. "I'm sending maintenance. A man with a master key and stale coffee breath." Turned up 10 minutes later, eyes fixed on the wall rather than the guest. He knocked on the platform with his knuckles, drew his box cutter, and slit the fabric along the seam. The smell hit like a hand. They both staggered. "Done look," Maynard said, but he was already pulling the torn cloth aside. Inside the frame, a face pressed to the wood, cheeks flattened, lips open, skin turned the color of old beeswax. One eye stared sideways like it was listening. Hair plastered to the cheek in black strings. The body had been folded into the coffin of the base, knees under chin, ribs making little tents under the shirt. The guest made a sound he had never made before. Maintenance swore, fumbled his phone. "I gotta call it in." "Sir, step outside. Also leave your bag." "My bag," the guest said, stupid, because the room had narrowed to a single point. The ear on that flattening face, the way it seemed to lean toward him. Listening. "Policy," Maintenance said. "Don't remove anything. Capsule want the room untouched." The guest stepped into the hole, shaking. The clerk stood there, pale, hands twisting. "I told him we needed to rotate the platform sooner," the clerk whispered, terrified of his own voice. From inside the room, the AC clicked off. The silence felt deeper than before, like the air had just listened and agreed. "Sir, maintenance called." "Can you come sign something?" The guest leaned back in, keeping his eyes away from the bed. Maintenance had a clipboard out, pen poised, sleeves rolled to the elbow. The room still stank, but less like the smell was hesitating. "Sign here," Maintenance said, tapping the page without looking up. His wrist hair stirred in the dead air. His pen hovered. His arm didn't move quite right. The guest stared. Maintenance's shadow on the wall didn't match his posture. It hunched, had tilted at the exact angle of the ear under the bed. The guest's gaze slid to the clipboard. "Deforms I consent to relocation." "Relocation of what?" he asked, voice undry. Maynard smiled, a small, tight thing that didn't reach his eyes. "Occupant," he said. The guest swallowed. "The body?" Maintenance's pen scratched the paper, even though the guest hadn't touched it. Signature lines filled with a version of his name, letters a little too long, as if pulled. "You smelled him," Menon said, like a correction. "He smelled you. That's how this kind of place works." On the bed, the torn fabric fluttered inward, as if the frame were breathing. The flattened face shifted a fraction deeper into the wood, like it had found more room. "I'm leaving," the guest said, backing up. The clerk reached for him, but not fast enough. The door swung shut with a soft, upholstered thud. The lock didn't click. It settled. He grabbed his suitcase. It was heavier than before. The zipper teeth were sticky, like they'd been glued with syrup. Inside, his shirts, his charger, his shaving kit, and at the very bottom, tucked perfectly in the suitcases, Reggie Bays the motel's courtesy. Bible A split open to a verse he didn't know. He owned the paper damp and black along the edges as if it had been pressed to wood. He dropped the bag. The AC came back. Not a blast, but a breath. The smell sweetened, like a hot room after baking. Looked down. Long, gray fingerprints had printed themselves around the suitcase handle. "Hey," Maynan said softly, standing between the bed and the door now. Pen still in hand, smile still wrong. Bed's got space again. Lucky night. The guest lunged for the door. The clerk on the other side grabbed the handle, pulling. For a second the gap widened, and he could see the hole. A slice of exit sign. A triangle of escape. The mattress moved behind him. He didn't look. He ran for the gap. Something under the bed frame rolled, the way a heavy thing rolls when it's found the center of itself. The door slipped from the clerk's grip, like it had been forgiven. The room suit and the lock didn't click. Siget. 2 hours later, when the sheriff arrived, the lobby smelled like coffee and lemon. Maitland handed over the form, neat and signed. The clerk swore up and down the guest had checked out early, apologized for the mix-up, pointed to the desk where the room key waited, warm under his palm. Upstairs, the air was clean and cold. The bed was made with sharp corners. The frame fabric was intact and tight, not a staple out of place, no smell. The sheriff bent, shining a light along the seam. Nothing. He stood, gave them both a look, and left. After they locked the door behind him, the clerk finally exhaled and wiped his eyes. "We should quit," he said. "We should burn this place down." Maitland glanced at the bed. Something under the fabric had stopped moving. "Can't," he said, voice mild, as if quoting a policy. He patted the platform's edge, like you'd soothe a crib. "It's a franchise." The forgotten baby monitor at 2 a.m. in their Utah ranch house. The monitor clicked alive with a soft hiss. Then a woman's voice began to sing an old lullaby neither of them knew. The melody, thin as thread and sweet as dust. In the crib, their baby slept on his back, mouth open, perfectly still. The green lead heartbeat line, steady and slow. They froze in bed, listening. The song had words now, half swallowed by static. "Little bird, little bones, hush your eyes." "Hush your eyes," the syllables blurred, then sharpened as if the singer had moved closer to the mic. The baby never stirred. "Interference," he whispered. Neighbors, their nearest neighbor, lived a mile away. He crept down the hall with the monitor in his hand. While she cracked the nursery door, the room smelled like talc and warm milk. Nightlight glowing. Diaper pail shut. The crib was exactly as they'd left it, except the mobile was turning against the air, backward, slow and steady, keeping time with the voice. The song faltered, then started again from the beginning, in the same pacing, like a recording loop. She reached into the crib to touch their son's foot. On the monitor, her hand slid into frame and stopped, hovering above the sheet. The camera showed no foot, no baby, just a dent in the mattress that didn't exist in front of her. "Glitch," she said. "Too fast." The mobile spun the other way, then stopped dead. From the monitor speaker, the lullaby shifted key, slipping darker. He turned the volume down. The volume did not change. The singer grew clearer, words rounding out in a mouth that felt too close to the microphone. "Hush now, don't you cry. I was good. I was quiet. I waited." He yanked the plug from the docking base. The monitor stayed on. The camera feed widened, as if the lens drew breath. The crib on screen had the same hand-painted rails, the same quilt, but the wood showed faint scorched crescents along the spindles. and the quilt stitching was frayed like something had worried it for years. A shadow rose in the corner. Not a figure, just the shape absence makes when it knows a room well. She whispered, "Who's there?" and hated herself for giving the dark a name to answer. The voice did not answer. It started a different verse, one neither of them had ever heard a mother sing. "Little bird, little bones, hush your throat, hush your..." It cut off like a hand had covered a mouth. The baby's chest hiccuped once, then settled. His eyes, still closed, flicked under lids, like he was watching someone stand where they couldn't see. He lifted the monitor higher, angling it toward the ceiling vent. On screen, the vent was open. In the real room, it was screwed shut. Something small and pale slipped past the top edge of the video frame, the way a moth finds the edge of a lampshade. The lullaby restarted, but the voice came from the hallway, now behind them soft, close to the crown of their heads, as though someone had bent to sing into their hair. They turned together. The hallway was empty. The monitor showed the hallway, too, but in its narrow grayscale. There were small hands braced against the wall at knee-height, greasy prints blooming and fading as if the wall itself were breathing. "Pick him up," he said. She did, and their son was heavy and real and warm. The monitor showed her arms holding no one at all. The lullaby stopped. For a heartbeat, the house held a silence so complete it felt like being underwater. Then a new sound threaded through the monitor, soft talking, not singing like someone coaxing a child awake in the wrong room. "Time to go," the woman's voice whispered, delighted. They left it on this time. The mobile above the crib began to turn again, backward and fast now, spinning until one of the little wooden birds snapped on its string and hit the sheet without a sound. He backed into the hall. She followed, clutching the baby. The monitor flickered once, twice, and then split into two panes. Left showed their nursery, tidy and safe. Right showed a room with their crib in ruin, rails blackened, quilt ashemered. And in that crib, something sat up under the sheet in slow, careful inches, as if trying not to wake anyone. "Out," he said. "Be, Iran." The farther they got from the nursery, the clearer the voice became. No static now, just warm breath and a smile shaped like a song. At the front door, the deadbolt stuck. If fumbled it, she put the baby down for a second to help. The monitor hung from her wrist by its strap. Lens pointed at the foyer. On this graying foyer was empty. In front of them, the air felt occupied. The deadbolt gave. Night rushed in. Tires unravel. Engine. Hands shaking. Seatbelts clicking. They threw the monitor on the passenger seat and sped down the dark road with their son blinking between them. At the end of the long dirt drive, the monitor chimed once, polite as a bell. Motion detected. Nursery. They looked, because people always look. The feed showed the nursery door, still open. The crib, still and neat. Then the camera auto-centered, adjusting to a face that had leaned in too close, filling the frame with nothing but two pale crescents, where eyes should be and the mouth they couldn't see but could hear. "She," the woman whispered, voice warm with practice. "He'll wake up. You don't want him to wake up, do you?" Their baby giggled in the back seat, bright, bubbling. Perfectan kept giggling even after they turned the monitor off, even after the screen was a black mirror that reflected nothing but their own white faces and the road unspooling into the dark. The motel mirror she checked into the only vacancy off I-55 after midnight, the kind of Mississippi motel that smelled like lemon cleaner and damp carpet. The mirror over the dresser looked wrong. Her face came back a fraction too narrow, the room behind her slanting like a house in a fun park. When she leaned closer, the corners stretched away, as if the glass was trying to keep distance. She tapped Italiano, hollow, like knocking on a door instead of a wall. "Probably a loose mount," the clerk said on the phone, half asleep. Maintenance shuffled, and 5 minutes later, a man in a faded shirt with a ring of keys and a screwdriver that squealed against stripped screws. "These old frames, they settle weird," he muttered. The mirror came off with a cough of plastered dust. Behind it, a square hole. Beyond that, darkness. A chair sat a few feet, back straight backed. No cushion. Facing the cutout, a cereal bowl on the seat held a wad of tissues and a single button. The maintenance man's breath stuttered. Somebody's. Storage, he tried. The woman's skin crawled. There's no other room behind that wall, right? Not since the renovation, he said, which didn't answer anything. They both listened. The hollow held a sound like someone clearing a throat and deciding not to speak. The maintenance man shined his phone flashlight into the crawl space. It ate the light. He angled the beam down. The floor was old concrete, scored with black lines like someone dragged nails across it and bored. Tiny grids. Let's cover this and talk to the manager in the morning, he said, and lifted the mirror back onto the frame. His hands left cloudy prints on the glass. She waited for a reflection. Instead, the mirror showed the room from 5 minutes ago. Empty bed, empty doorway. No maintenance man. No woman, just stillness, like a paused tape. She stepped left. The hair in the mirror didn't move. The chair, though visible for a sliver around the frame, had inched forward. It was closer to the cutout than it had been. She didn't remember anyone touching it. The maintenance man whispered. He stood beside her in the real room, shoulder nearly touching. In the mirror doorway was still empty. He reached up and wiped his sleeve over the glass. The sleeve erased nothing. The empty room feed didn't smear. He swore, softly. This is some kind of someone knocked from inside the wall. Gentle, twice. Like returning a courtesy. He grabbed the mirror's side again. We're taking this down, and you're switching rooms. He pulled. The mirror didn't budge. He put his weight into it. The glass didn't flex. It felt like trying to lift a manhole cover that wouldn't admit there was a street above it. Okay, he said, voice thin. He set his palms flat on the surface and pushed harder. For a heartbeat, the mirror showed his hands as if pressed on the far side of an aquarium pail, a little warped. Then the hands in the reflection didn't match his. The fingers were too long. The nails were darker, as if wet. Don't, the woman said, backing away. Leave it. The maintenance man did the opposite and yanked. A hairline crack flashed across the glass like lightning. The room's lamp flickered, dimmed, flared. The reflected version of the lamp didn't. It burned steady and low, like a candle under a jar. From the crawl space, something dragged the chair the rest of the way with a small, practical scrape. The bowl clinked. The mirror's wrong angle tilted just enough to show the cutout again. She saw herself, finally, not facing the mirror. Sitting in the chair behind it, her own head turned slightly, listening at the hole as if it were a seashell. In the reflection, she held very still. When she blinked, the motion was a slow, sticky peel, like separating two pages stuck together. Her phone vibrated on the dresser. The caller ID said front desk. She answered without taking her eyes off the glass.
Hello?
Her voice came back with a half-second delay, warped by the cheap line. Hello, the desk said. Ma'am, sorry to bother you, goodie. Keep the television down. Guests have complained about voices from your room. We don't have the TV on, she said. There was a pause. You aren't in room 12, the clerk said carefully. You checked into 14. She looked at the keycard sleeve. 14 in black marker. The mirror showed a door number reflected backward at the edge of the frame. 21. The maintenance man took the phone, spoke low, then handed it back like it was hot. We're moving you. Now, he went to the door. The lock engaged with a dull thunk. He tried. The deadbolt. It spun without catching, like it had been unscrewed from the other side. The chain slid across on its own and set itself. In the mirror empty room's door stood wide open to a dark hall. Something leaned into the frame from the right. A shape with a familiar faded shirt. A ring of keys and a screwdriver held low like a favor. It raised a hand and tapped the glass. Hollow. Polite. Hey, the reflected maintenance man said, smiling a little too long. Y'all called about a loose mount? He stepped in and set the chair gently, carefully, right under the cutout. He didn't look at them. He looked through them, as if they'd already stood aside. In the real room, the maintenance man swore again under his breath and picked up his screwdriver. "Get your bag," he said. "We're going to the window." She made it 3 steps before the mirror changed the angle one last time and caught their eyes straight on. Now it wasn't a room, or a crawl space, or a chair. It was a hallway, copy paper white, with a dozen identical mirrors mounted at perfect intervals. In each one, a different version of her looked out older, younger, hair longer, hair gone each, seated in a chair with knees together, hands folded just out of sight. All the angles were true. All the reflections were perfect. None of them blinked. Only one smiled. The lamp in the motel room went out. The hollow knock came again, from both sides at once, and from the phone, thin as a dial tone, the clerk's voice returned in a whisper. "Ma'am, there's someone asking for you at the office. Says she's from room 20. Says the mirror in there doesn't reflect right. The empty house showing the old Victorian sat 3 blocks off Main, all peeling paint in magnolia shade, the kind of listing that wanted a forgiving lens and a patient buyer." Marla let herself in, her flats whispering on the runner as the front door side shut behind her. It was late enough that the light had gone pewter. She clicked on the foyer lamp. It made a little island in the dim. "Hello?" she called, out of habit, even though she'd already done the walk through that morning. Empty. Fresh lockbox. Utilities barely on. The air had that attic dry sweetness of old timber. Then came the footsteps overhead, not vague, not house-settling, pacing, heel to toe, across the upstairs hall. Slow. Turning. Coming back. Contractor, she tried. Swallowing. No. Non-swear. The pacing stopped, right where the landing would be. Marla went up, because that's what you do when you sell a house. Each stair creaked in its own note, like a scale being practiced. At the top, the hall ran past for open doors. She checked each room. Realtor comb. Guest room empty. Nursery. Dust blind and bare. Primary. Sun bleached. Wallpaper empty. The last door was half closed. She pushed it with 2 fingers. Inside, one wooden chair faced the wall. It rocked, a steady, patient motion, as if someone had just stood up. No breeze. Window, painted shut. The chair's shadow swung back and forth like a pendulum. "Cute," she said to nobody, and reached for her phone to take a video buyer's loved character. Her camera showed the chair and the wall. Nothing more. But as the phone's mic picked up sound, the rocking got louder on the recording than in the room, the way ocean always sounds bigger on tape. Marla stepped closer. The chair kept rocking. She touched the top rail to stop it. It didn't stop. Her hand felt the wood cool, splinter smooth, and at the same time, the chair's motion slipped through her palm like a current passing under ice. The wall in front of the chair was scuffed waist-high, a pale oval worn smooth by years of... what? Heads. Backs. The wallpaper there was newer, a rectangle a shade brighter than the rest, like a patch over a hole. From somewhere below, the front door latch clicked. Marla froze. She listened hard for voices, for the lockbox clatter. The house answered with a big, empty inhale. Then the chair changed cadence forward, back, forward. Back end didn't come back. It held pitched, like it was leaning into someone's weight that wasn't there. The scuffed oval on the wall pressed inward by a fraction, as if it were softer than it looked. "Okay," Marla whispered, stepping back. The chair rocked without moving. The way a held breath is still breathing. Her phone buzzed in her hand. A new message, your 5:30 showing just checked in. She frowned no. One had come through the door. Her phone screen reflected the room. In the glass, the chair wasn't facing the wall at all. It was turned toward her, rocking, empty. Behind it, where the wall should be, the reflection showed a doorway. Beyond that doorway, a narrow space. Deep end gray, with wallpaper that didn't match. Marla lowered the phone. No doorway. Just wall. She raised the phone again. Doorway. And now, just to the threshold. A pair of feet bare, gray with dust pointed toward the chair. The chair in the real room thumped once against the wall, polite as a knock. From the staircase, the exact sound of footsteps began again, not coming up leaving. Down the hall, down the stairs, calm as you please. Marla stood there, heart kicking, and listened to the front door open in the house she knew was empty. It swung wide in her mind. In the real air, only the faintest draft reached her cheek. Her phone chimed a second time. Showing ended. Feedback submitted. Seller still in the house. Would prefer vacant. The timestamp read 5:32. Her calendar said 5:28. The chair slowed. The walls, scuffed oval, breathed back out. Marla backed into the hall and took the stairs carefully. The foyer lamp was off, though she hadn't touched it. The front door was bolted. The lockbox sat where she'd left it, unbothered and bright. She stepped onto the porch to gulp evening air. Cicadas. Raspet. Normal. Normal. When she turned to pull the door closed, the beveled glass in the upper panel flashed her reflection. In it, the upstairs hall behind her was darker than it should have been. The last room's door stood wide, the chair square to the doorway now. Itraktanse stopped. Behind the chair, in the reflection only, the patch of newer wallpaper loosened along its edge and curled back, as if something behind it had taken a deeper breath and finally had room. Marla locked the door and set the showing to by appointment only. That night, 3 separate buyers messaged to say the house felt occupied. One of them sent a photo from the street second-floor window, a room with a chair facing the wall. In the photo, the chair's shadow fell toward the glass, long and teen like someone standing between the chair and the wall, waiting for her to come back and finish the tour. The bathroom window at 3 a.m. in her Chicago studio. Maya woke to the slick, deliberate rasp of her bathroom window sliding up metal and paint. Careful, like someone practiced. She grabbed her aluminum bat, heart jackhammering. And, receding, the shower curtain hung still. The window was closed. The tiles shone with clean moonlight. No breath but hers. No one. She didn't sleep after that, just watched the door until the blue edge of morning. When the sun finally broke, she forced herself back into the bathroom and froze. Wet, muddy footprints tracked from the tub to the sink, heel to toe, small and bare. Each one perfectly arched, like a child had stepped out of the drain and walked across the tile. They stopped at the mirror. Maya's scalp prickled. She checked the window. Pane sealed, unmoved. She wiped one print with toilet paper. The mud smeared and left a dark crescent. She followed the trail back to the tub and yanked the curtain aside. The drain was clogged with hair that wasn't hers, thin and pale, snarled around a rubbery ribbon of red and black silt, like something from a riverbed. The air smelled like algae and pennies. She gagged, pulled it free, and stuffed it into a trash bag, hands shaking. Her phone buzzed. A campus alert. Caution. Break-in reported 2 blocks east. Suspect believed to have entered through bathroom windows. Her knees went weak with relief. Human, she thought. A prowler. A story with edges. That night, she shoved a dresser against the bathroom door and slept with the bat on her chest. At 3:03 a.m., the sound came again, window sliding open, but this time it came from the wrong direction. Not the wall, but the floor, from under the door, like the sound had been poured through the gap. The dresser trembled once, politely. The bat went cold in her hands, as if pulled from water. Maya? A small voice whispered from the bathroom, girlish and papery. It stuck again. Her throat closed. She didn't answer. The knob turned twice, gently, as if someone to light to rattle it was trying to learn how locks worked. Then silence, except for a faint trickle, like water circling itself. At dawn, she pushed the dresser aside and opened the door. New footprints had appeared, darker, fresher, leading from the tub to the mirror. In the glass, her face looked gray and tired, and something faint stood behind her, a shadow no thicker than steam, head tilted toward the window. There were finger marks now on the inside of the glass. 5 little arcs at the bottom sash where paint had bubbled, as if tiny nails had scraped and scraped, patient as rain. She pried the window, heart in her teeth, and it finally shrieked open. Cold air rushed in, carrying lake stink. She stared down into the light well. Brick, puddles, a coil of rusted pipe and a child's handprint in the mud, pressed so deep the water had collected in each finger. Behind her, the mirror fogged, though the room was cold. Letters bloomed backward in the condensation, clumsy and wrong-handed, like someone tracing from the other side. Let me back in. Her, Fonchi, myth. Another campus alert. Suspect apprehended. Relief Larette, then died. When she scrolled, suspect is a 42-year-old male. No evidence of entry at student residences. Initial reports were false. The footprints on the tile began to darken, the edges bleeding outward, as if soaking up new water. One by one, they turned 2 puddles, and in each puddle a tiny ripple formed, spreading to the edges, returning to the center, never ending. She slammed the window and painted it shut that afternoon. She slept at a friend's place for a week. When she finally returned, the bathroom was bone dry, spotless, as if scrubbed by a stranger. The only thing out of place was the mirror. Every morning, it showed the room perfectly except for the window, which it kept showing half open, with a thin arm reaching in, hand relaxed, as if feeling for the floor. Sometimes the arm was a little longer. Sometimes the fingers curled, like they'd found something to hold. The shadow at the gas pump. The trucker rolled into the only station for 50 miles, neon stuttering like a bad heartbeat. The pumps were dead quiet, canopy lights buzzing, a moth pinned to each. He swiped his card, leaned against the cab, and started talking, hands carving the air. Head cocked, like he was listening to someone right beside him. He even laughed once, short and friendly, like greeting an old road buddy. The cashier watched later on CCTV, because the man never came in to pay, and corporate wanted time. On screen, the trucker was animated, expressive, nodding, pointing to the passenger door, like offering a ride. The lot around him was empty, no cars, no customers, just his long shadow thrown across Pump 8. But the shadow kept moving when he didn't. At first it seemed like lag. He'd lift a hand, and a beat later the shadow would raise its own, fingers long, bending too far. Then the delay flipped it. Shadow moving first, coaxing his arm up after, turning his shoulders, angling his head like a parent guiding a toddler. The trucker's smile thinned, then steadied, like choosing not to notice. The audio mic caught a single phrase when the wind died. "Hop in, then," the trucker said. Cheerful and a little tired, he walked around to the passenger side and opened the door. The camera showed an empty cab and a dark shape sliding up the running board, pulling itself into the seat with both hands. The cashier rewound, full-screened the frame. The passenger seat was still empty. The shadow, though it split one part, stayed under the truck, stretched thin. The other sat in the cab where no one was, head turning to face him through the glass. Its eyes were 2 holes where the canopy lights fell straight through and landed on the far seat. He hit pause, heart punching. In the frozen frame, the trucker reached across the empty seat and pulled the belt, clicked it shut like he'd done it 100 times. He patted the air where a shoulder should be. The buckle in the camera didn't move, not even a millimeter. The rig rolled out onto the highway like a whale slipping into deep water. The canopy lights flickered once, twice, and went steady. The cashier saved the clip, filed the incident, told himself the brain fills blanks when it's late. At dawn, 2 state troopers came in, asking for footage. They'd found a jackknifed semi in the median 20 miles east. No skid marks, no brake lights. It had just folded like a closing book. The driver's seat was empty, the windshield spidered, but unbroken. The passenger seat belt was cut clean through, ends charred like it had been burned from the inside. No footprints in the dirt. No sign of the driver anywhere. The cashier pulled the clip again, hand shaking now. He watched the trucker wave, grin, open the door. He watched the shadow climb in and look at the camera. Then he noticed something he'd missed all night. In the bottom right corner, Mirrored in the pump glass, there was a second shadow behind the trucker's taller, with its head bent, like it didn't fit under the canopy. It wasn't delayed. It wasn't leading. It was counting with its fingers. Slow and deliberate, like a teacher watching a student catch up. 1, 2, 3. 3. On 3. The trucker's grin widened, and he leaned a little closer to the empty seat, like finally hearing the end of a long story. They scrubbed the clip for faces. There weren't any, just reflections of lights and the patient dark of the desert. Crowding up to the concrete, waiting for someone to open a door and say the words that meant yes. Out on the highway where the semi lay folded, a tow operator swore he heard talking behind him 2 voices. One thin and friendly, one just air moving, shaping syllables without any throat at all. He turned and saw nothing but his own shadow and the stationist's receipt fluttering in the grass. It kept trying to stand up like it wanted to be read. Later, the cashier stopped topping off his tank at night. If the pump clicked off early, he let it. Some shadows don't like to be full. They prefer a little room to move around in. And they always look like they're agreeing with somebody, even when nobody's there. The crawling man at 3 a.m. The mall was all humming vents and rolling chair wheels. The kind of quiet that collects in corners. 2 security guards around us, and to quench the feeds from a wall of flickering screens. On Cam 12, the food court spilled open like a drained aquarium. Tile slick, tables appended for overnight mopping, neon logos asleep. Then a shape slid in from the bottom edge of the frame. At first it looked like a doglo, jointed. Quick-butt dogs don't have hands. And this had hands, palms flat, fingers splayed like starfish, knees tucked under, a white shirt stretched tight along a spine that rose and fell too many times between neck and waist. It crawled. Not stumble crawl. Not drunk crawl. It moved like water fleeing a break in the pipe smooth. Impossible. In 6 seconds, it crossed what should have taken 20. In Trey Moore, it stuck to a support column, flattened to it, then peeled around to the far side like turning a page. Pause it, Deke said, already standing. Ramos rewound, frame-stepped. The thing's head never lifted. The hair on the back of its neck had a parted seam like a mouth that wasn't open yet. They grabbed flashlights, radios, sleeves still damp from coffee. Food court doors opened with a clack they never make at night. The air was chlorine cool. Their boots thundered too loud, making them feel like targets. Maintenance, Deke called, the word small and hopeful. No answer. Chairs creaked in settling echo. A straw wrapper skated across tile. Ramos swept his beam under tables, ogre bright light, knifed between steel legs. Nothing. Nothing. Then a long hand pressed flat to the floor, right where the light stopped. The fingers were pale enough to reflect. The hand stayed, spread like it was measuring something. Ramos stepped closer, hard knifing. The hand slid backward, noiseless, as if pulled by a rope. They chased, past the pretzel stand, past the locked carousel with horses posed mid. The carousel mirrors gave back to men and a third shape that didn't exist in front of them, low, quick, an afterimage that stayed one reflection behind, like it was catching up to the idea of itself. Loading corridor, Ramos said, and they pushed through a fire door into the long gray throat behind the stores. The cameras in this hole don't stream. They record to local. The only live feed was the tiny red light on the ceiling on, watching, indifferent. Their radios hissed. Static, then a voice with clean edges. Cam 12 shows clear, said their supervisor from the office. You're chasing a glitch. We saw it on the floor, Deke said. It moved around the soft scrape interrupted. Both beams swung. 50 feet down, a ceiling tile hung an inch low. Dust sifted. A small piece of gray foam broke and fell without a sound. Then the tile lifted gently as if breath pushed from beneath. A face peeked out upside down just the lower half chin. Throat, a mouth that opened left to right, like a zipper easing apart. It didn't smile. It just counted teeth. Slow as gears. Ramos stepped backward before he remembered to run forward. His light jittered. The face withdrew. The tiles settled. Something pattered above fast 4-beat gallop on acoustic panels, going the wrong direction for any human weight. They sprinted back into the food court, lungs hot. The carousel had started to turn. No music. Just the belt underneath, dragging slowly. Horses ticking forward. On the opposite side, for one frame of the rotation, they saw it riding. Crouched low across 2 horses, hands hooked 2 poles, back bent in a bow, not holding on like a man, hanging off like a bat, pretending to know what up is. He'd watched them with the top of its head, hair first licked. Then the carousel spun, and it was gone. Shut it down, Ramos said, hand shaking only a little. He hit the kill on the breaker. The carousel didn't stop. It sped up. The Avis radio cut in again, crisp, annoyed. Cut the theatrics. Cameras show you to talking to air. Cam 12 shows nobody. Cam 4 shows nobody. Oh, clear. Ramos looked up to the nearest dome camera. Inside the smoked glass, there was a face, not theirs. Theirs were below, panting. This face was pressed to the inside, cheeks flat, a thin line of lips running ear to ear, fogging the dome with long, even breaths. It blinked sideways, like a shutter rotating. He hit Deck's arm so hard the flashlight dropped. The beam rolled strobed with each bounce, and in those stutters the food court floor seemed to ripple, like something beneath was pushing up to test the tile. Then everything went still. The carousel clicked once, twice, and halted. The dome camera showed only its dark bubble. They backed out, the fire door shut on a sigh. In the office, supervisor spun in his chair, pissed but trying for amused. Ran 3 floors for a Roomba. Huh? He queued up replay on Cam 12. The food court appeared in green-gray. 2 guards burst in, lights sweeping. They crossed the tiles, paused, argued. No carousel movement, no crawling thing. Just them, in an empty mall, convincing themselves of ghosts. See, he said, leaning back. Ramos and Deke stared. On the right edge of the frame, a shadow detached from a support column. Sleek as a fish, it crossed the mile of tile in 6 seconds and vanished under their feet. The supervisor didn't even glance that far. He was watching himself, reflected in the glass. Send me the clip, Ramos said, playing along, voice steadying. The supervisor emailed it. Back home, after dawn, Ramos watched the file again on his laptop. He scrubbed frame by frame, slowed, enhanced. Every time the crawling shape came near the lens, the picture broke into clean squares, as if the program didn't have the right pieces to draw a person that shape. Then he scrolled lower. Beneath the video player was the timeline thumbnail frames of the night. 2:41 a.m. Empty court. 2:52. A wisp of reflection. 3 o'clock. The sprint. 3:01. Still. A gray dot appeared under 3:33 that hadn't been there on first watch. E clicked. Italiano. The feed opened to the carousel glass, inches from the lens. Inside the dome, the fog had written something with the clean line of a tongue or a fingertip. We see. What'd you see? The fog cleared in a slow exhale. Behind the words, 2 shadows hung upside down in a tight, gleeful shiver. He closed the laptop so hard it bit his palm. The sting felt good. Real. His phone buzzed. A text from Deke. Supervisor wants to talk. He says you left your flashlight there. Ramos looked at the table. His flashlight sat right beside his keys. He texted a picture back. Got it. 3 dots bubbled. Then, stop it. His phone screen dimmed. The black reflected his face, then the face behind his, higher and wrong, peered down like it was standing on the ceiling and learning how to look at him the way he looked at screens. The phone's camera light turned on by itself. He didn't drop it. He didn't run. It set it face up on the table, turned, and looked at the bare white ceiling. It looked back. The storm shelter knocked, the sirens wailed. The sky went the wrong color, and the Hollis family scrambled into the in-ground storm shelter built under their garage. bolting the steel lid as the tornado roared down the street like a train with teeth. The air inside smelled like rubber and bleach. The flashlight carved white cones across concrete. The youngest boy whimpered, counting breaths. The power died. The wind became everything. Then 3 slow knocks came from the shelter, wall behind the shelving. Hollow and polite, like a neighbor testing a door. Dad froze with his hand on the radio. "Probably debris," he said, but the knocks came again, even and spaced, ignoring the outside chaos, like someone choosing their moment in a quiet hallway. Mom put an arm across the kids and whispered, "Who's there?" A stupid question that made the dark feel deeper. The knocks answered. 3, then 2, then 1. A rhythm that made the hair on their arms lift. Dad rapped back reflexively 3, in reply then hissed at himself, as if he'd picked up a phone he shouldn't have. The wind slammed the lid. Dust sifted like gray snow. The radio coughed out static, and a half-voice. "Shelter. If you can hear, stay. Underground." Then a different sound threaded under the storm, the thin scrape of fingernails inside concrete. Traveling, searching for seams. "Someone fell in," Mom said, because a sane sentence felt safer than silence. "A neighbor. The old well. We have 2. But there was nowhere to open. It was poured wall, smooth and sealed since the install. No access panel. No crawl space, just slab. The youngest boy pressed his ear to the cool concrete and went suddenly still. "It's saying my name," he whispered, "but wrong." "Back up," Dad snapped, dragging him away. He shone the flashlight along the wall. In the beam, hairline cracks spidered out where the knocking had been, as if drawn by a pencil from inside. Dust powder fell in steady little drifts, making pale piles on the floor like birthday cake flakes. The knocks resumed, now closer to the floor, now higher, as if 2 hands were feeling their way up. The radio clicked, then spoke in Dad's voice. "Let us in," it said, calm and flat, not matching his trembling jaw. "It's cold." Dad slapped the radio off. It kept talking. The flashlight flickered. The storm above screamed. 10 softened one of those false lulls that make you feel like the world just inhaled. On the wall, the cracks joined into an oblong shape exactly the size of the shelter's steel lid. Mom realized, too late, that whoever poured it had traced the door onto the side when it was still wet. A builder's guide that never mattered until now, when the shape rose faintly like old chalk under rain. The knocking moved into the traced door and began to count. 3, 2, 1, then stopped, as if waiting for them to unlock. "We don't open," Dad said firmly. To them, to the wall, to whatever listened. "We don't open for anything." The floor vibrated with a new weight, not the tornado's roll, but a footfall, deliberate and careful, pacing along the outside of the shelter like a person in a small room deciding where to stand. The older daughter made a broken sound. "It's under the garage," she said, voice strangled. "How can anything be walking there?" The radio, blessedly off, clicked anyway and whispered the weatherman's voice. Tornado warning extended. "Stay sheltered. Do not answer knocks." "Who would—" Mom breathed, and the wall knocked back. One single amused tap. A smell seeped through the hairline, crack sweat, dirt, and pennies. The youngest boy sneezed and then giggled, a weird hiccup of sound too bright for the dark. The giggle echoed wrong, like it had more room than the shelter gave it, and returned to them a fraction of a second late, stretched. Dad aimed the flashlight at the trace door. "If this is a sick joke," he said to the wall, to the storm, to the old house, "stop." The beam caught fingerprints in the dust rows of them, small and perfect, as if a kindergarten class had pressed their hands there years ago and walked away. The prints were fresh. The knocks began again, faster now, childlike. Excited, then halted as the lid above them heavy bolted, suffrang with a single, heavy knock from outside. "Don't," Mom begged. They all stared up. The garage on top of them howled and groaned. The lid knocked again, 3 times. Patient, Dad set the flashlight down, climbed the short ladder, pressed his ear to the steel, and held his breath. Nothing. Just wind. He put his palm on the latch. "Don't," Mom said, sharper. "Please." Something thin slid down the inside of the wall behind her, like rain on glass, except it was inside the concrete, inside the sealed pore, a wet line finding gravity. It left a dark streak that ended at the floor with a soft pat. Mom looked down. The streak was red. From the radio, in the older daughter's voice now, came a whisper right against their ears. "It's safer in here if you open." The storm roared back all at once, a train exploding through a tunnel. The shelter shook. The traced door on the wall flexed outward, a breath from inside pushing against concrete, and for a heartbeat the concrete bowed, slick and curved, like a cheek pressed against a thin window. On the other side of the steel lid, something knocked one final time. But the sound didn't travel from above. It bloomed from inside the lid itself, like knuckles rapping bone. Dad let go of the latch. The storm ripped past. The radio died. The knocks stopped. Dust settled in the flashlight beam. A gentle snow and a long, held breath. They stayed until the all clear. No sleep. No one speaking in more than a whisper. When the sirens finally quieted and the wind went ordinary again, Dad unbolted the lid and lifted. The garage was mostly intact, a mess of leaves and grit. The car windows were fogged from the inside, little handprints smeared along the glass, as if someone had been trying to see in. The concrete around the shelter hatch bore a perfect oval of scuffed dust, like shoes had pivoted there for a long time. They climbed out into a morning that smelled like wet lumber and ozone. The youngest boy craned down the ladder, peering into the shelter they'd just left. "Where's the door?" he asked. They frowned. The steel lid was under Dad's hands. "Right here?" "No," the boy said, pointing. Inside, along the wall where the trace door had flexed, the concrete was smooth again. No cracks, no dust prints, no red streak, just a single new seam, hair-thin and curved, exactly where a second door would be if the shelter had a mirror. He reached out, curious, and tapped the spot with one knuckle. Something on the other side tapped back, exactly where his finger was, as if it had been waiting for the shape of his hand. The mannequin room, they pushed through the rusted fire door, into the third floor of a dead Detroit department store, their flashlights cutting dust like snow in headlights. The mannequins' dozen stood in a showroom frozen mid-remodel. All of them turned to face a single stained corner where the wallpaper had bubbled and split. "Art installation?" Dev muttered. "Filming? Creepy." "On purpose. Then why the shoes?" Maya said. Along the floor, a trail of mismatched heels and loafers pointed toward the same corner, like breadcrumbs from 100 outfits, like everything here had learned to walk and chose the same destination. They circled the line of plastic bodies, glossy palms, eternally parted lips, eyelashes thick with gray. A child mannequin stood nearest the corner, its hand lifted as if someone had taped a price tag to its wrist that read, "Do not turn." Dev rolled his eyes and turned his back to pan the room. Classic haunted. He stopped. "Where's the kid one?" Maya swung her light. The child mannequin still stood by the corner, hand up. But its head, which had been bowed, was tilted now just enough to catch the beam and throw a tiny crescent of glare like an eye. Dev swore the pose had changed. Maya said, "You blinked." They laughed, too loudly. Dust drifted. "Let's fix their prank," Dev said, stepping toward the nearest adult mannequin. He grabbed its cold shoulders and twisted. It didn't budge. He frowned and pushed harder. Every mannequin on the floor trembled in sympathy, just the faintest shimmy without actually turning. "Okay," Maya whispered, suddenly aware of the air pressure the way sound felt thick near the corner, like someone was already speaking there and the room was holding its breath. "Let's record the corner and go." They set the camera on a tripod, lens pointed straight at the stained wallpaper. In the frame, a slice of mannequin army, all facing, and that child. With a tag. 3 minutes, Dev said, turning away to pack a bag. Maya faced the camera to watch the preview screen, tiny, jittering, black and white. The mannequins were still. The corner was still. Her breath fogged, and the screen fogged a heartbeat later, like the camera was breathing with a delay. "Did you feel that?" Dev asked. "Floor just flexed." Maya didn't answer. On the preview, the child mannequin raised its finger to its lips. In the room, nothing moved. "Dev," she said. He turned, saw the mannequins exactly as they were, then looked down at the screen and saw the child make a tiny beckoning motion with its free hand. "Eh?" Looked up. The tag on the child's wrist now faced them. The words had been written on both sides. "Do not turn." "Enough," Dev said, reaching to snatch the camera. He glanced back, once at the corner behind him, and when his eyes left the screen, a weight tapped his calf. He flinched. The child mannequin stood an inch closer, hand lowered, tag swinging. "Stop," Maya said, voice sharp. "You moved it." "I didn't." His voice had that thin thread of lying, even to himself. On the preview, the wall's bubbled paper bulged outward, just a little. A seam lifted, breathing. Something inside the wall pressed against it from the other side, testing stitches. The mannequins leaned imperceptibly in person, impossible to miss. On videotape, toward the corner. Like wheat, toward a wind. "Let's go," Maya said. She grabbed the tripod, kept the lens on the corner, walking backward. The mannequins remained motionless in the room. On the screen, their feet slid an inch. Another inch. The child's shadow stretched, fingers long as needles. "You're scaring yourself," Dev said, and turned his back to tug the fire door open. The sound came from inside the wallwood, or ribs, settling. A whisper threaded the room. "Face the wall." Maya felt it in her teeth. Dev pulled the door. It stuck. He yanked. The metal bar gave with a bung end. The room exhaled. Every mannequin in the store snapped a fraction. A polite click of plastic necks returning to neutral, like a congregation relieved. Maya didn't celebrate. On the preview, the camera's lens had turned. It no longer faced the corner. It faced them. The two of them stood in the tiny screen, backlit by the hallway, each with a tangle of weak flashlight beams. Behind them, on the monitor only, the mannequins had already swiveled. Not to the corner now. To the camera. "To the viewers," Dev Maya said. "Strong lad, don't turn around." He turned. In real space, he saw a glossy crowd still aimed at the wall. On the screen watched 100 heads lock onto him. The child in the feed raised one finger to lips again and then, almost kingly, pointed at the tag on its wrist. "Do not turn." Dev flushed, angry at the trick his brain was playing. He lifted the tripod, intending to smash the camera, to stop seeing whatever this was. As he swung, the preview flared white, and when it cleared, the mannequins appeared where they had been a heartbeat before, faces to the corner. Calm. Patient. "See him," he said, laughing with his wrong mouth. Glitch. Maya stared at the tag. The words had changed. "Do not turn around." She didn't. She backed through the door, pulling Dev by his sleeve. Eyes glued to the tiny screen where the mannequins now stood directly behind them, their hands rising in a pale forest, ready to settle on shoulders that thought they were alone. They made it to the stairs. I'm breathless. They dared one look at the privy just. To be sure, the floor above had stayed where it belonged. The camera showed an empty third floor. No mannequins, no corner. Just open space, rubbed raw, floorboards gleaming like something had paced there for years. Dev lifted his head, heart slowing. In the glass of a long dark display case beside them, 30 pale faces looked back, lined shoulder to shoulder, smooth and delighted. They had never left the third floor. They had moved around it. The whispering cab ride, he caught the cab on Rampart, rain needling the windshield, jazz leaking from somewhere in the quarter like a radio left on in another life. The driver nodded but never turned, face a silhouette in the meter's red glow. Hands soft on the wheel like he'd been driving forever. The partition glass was clean enough to see his own reflection sitting behind. him pale, damp, the right eye twitching. They slid through narrow streets, slick as obsidian, passing closed beignets and neon saints. The cab smelled like wet canvas and pennies. He texted an address. The driver hummed under his breath, a low, steady note, like tuning a string. Halfway across a shadowed stretch by the cemetery, he heard it, whispering right behind his ear, breathy, insistent, threading words into the dark. He didn't move. He was the only passenger. "Hey," he said, forcing a laugh. "You got a radio back there?" Or the whisper slid along the seat's seam. A second voice joined it, chittering faster, like pages turning with fingertips too long. He twisted around. The back seat was empty. Black leather, rain-dotted window, his own reflection looking back. An angle of his jaw, and behind him the driver's head. Still, still, still. "Sir," he said, "you hearing that?" The driver's humming stopped. The car got quieter than cars get. The whispers didn't. He leaned forward to tap the glass. His knuckle left a fogged imprint that didn't fade. "Hey!" "Without turning," the driver said. "Very soft. Don't answer them." "Answer who?" "The ones who keep the other routes." His voice sounded tired, like a man on his last shift. "Keep your eyes down." The whispers licked his neck now. Syllables he almost recognized. Names. Street names. His own name. He swallowed. "All right," he said, to the air. "I'm not." The whispers perked like dogs hearing dinner. Thread-thin nails clicked once against the vinyl. He clamped his mouth shut so fast his teeth hurt. They drifted past a block of shotgun houses with porches drowned in Spanish moss. In the glass of the dark window, he caught them. Smudges of faces where no faces were. Pressed to the reflection of the cab's back seat. Mouths moving, lips too money. The suggestion of teeth. In the real seat, nothing. In the reflection, a crowd. He snapped his gaze to his lap and watched rainwater drip from his cuff. The driver's hands, in the mirror, were steady. "Almost there," the driver said. The whispers changed. Softer. Trying to be kind. A child's whisper mixed in, calling a mama that wasn't his. Promising warmth. Promising shortcuts. One voice crooned, "Left here, baby. Left if you want to get home." Left's faster. The meter ticked. The driver didn't turn left. "Why won't you look at me?" he asked the driver, voice small. "You haven't looked once?" The driver's shoulders rose and fell. "Because they will use your face," he said, "and then you'll listen." He risked a glance at the partition. His reflection met his eyes. The driver's reflection, though, was smiling now. A wide, wrong smile he couldn't see on the real man. The reflection lifted one hand from the wheel and beckoned. Slow, curling finger. His stomach dropped. The driver's real hands never moved. The cab braked at a red light by a mural of painted angels peeling off brick. The whisper behind him fell into a hush. Then, right at his ear, a single wet breath said, like a secret shared, "He didn't hail us." The light turned green. The cab didn't move. "Sir," he said. "Go." The driver spoke without turning. "Don't open the door." The lock clicked up under his fingers. He hadn't touched it. He pressed it down. It clicked up again. The door handle twitched like something outside had hooked it. The whispers turned eager, layered, a dozen mouths shaping the same word. Home. The meter ticked. The reflection of the driver leaned close to the glass on the wrong side and fogged it with a breath that smelled like river mud. He squeezed his eyes shut. "Please," he said. He didn't know to whom. The car lurched forward. The handle stilled. The whispers, all at once, went quiet, as if the street had ended under them and they were driving on nothing. They slid to the curb in front of his building. Streetlight yellowed the rain. He fumbled bills and dropped too many on the passenger seat, desperate to get out while the world still made sense. "Thank you," he said, voice shaking. "I thank you." The driver nodded. Still didn't look back. "Next time," he said, "don't hail the yellow ones on empty blocks. They're never ours." He reached for the door. It opened smooth. He stepped into the wet night, shoes soaking, lungs remembering air. He shut the door. The cab pulled away without a brake flash, making no splash in puddles that should have splashed. In the glass of the lobby door, he saw the cab drift past behind him. In the reflection, he sat in the back seat, pale and damp, watching himself through the partition. He watched his own mouth form a word he didn't remember saying. The cab was gone when he turned. Upstairs, hands shaking, he dropped his keys in the bowl and checked his phone. No new rides on the app, no charge, no cab company ping, just one new voicemail. Time-stamped, 10 minutes before he hailed the car. A whispering chorus, layered and breathy, all speaking at once. His own voice braided through theirs, giving his address, promising he'd be waiting outside, promising he wouldn't look back. The parking garage stalker level 5A of the Dallas garage was so quiet she could hear the sodium lamps buzzing, a tired hornet trapped in concrete. Her heels sounded too loud, echoing in the long lanes of empty spaces. One echo came back late, like a second set of steps one beat behind. She glanced over her shoulder. Just painted arrows, caged light, a security mirror warped into an eye. Say, sped up. The echo sped up too, a fraction delayed, as if it had to hear her first. Her key fob clicked. Hazard lights blinked on her sedan like a flare in fog. She jogged, then ran. The echo turned into a slap, slap, slap that curved when she curved, stopped when she fumbled, closed the distance when her breath hitched. She barked to the aisle behind her, the way a dog bares its teeth at the dark. Nothing. Just the garage breathing through the vents. She dove into the car, hands shaking so hard, the first try missed the start button. Thunk, second try caught. Engine alive. She locked the doors, eyes scanning the mirrors. Empty lanes, no feet under cars. No shadow sliding along a bumper, but the slap, slap, slap kept coming. Now from inside the car through the chassis like something had run right under her and was settling into the frame. Her phone lit with a call from an unknown number. She ignored it and tore out toward the exit. The concrete pillars strobed the cabin. Between two pillars, the rear view showed a tall smear, as if a person had been stretched by speed, all shoulders and no face. She blinked and it was gone. She parked at the police station with her hands still white on the wheel. An officer walked her back through the footage, minute by minute, camera by camera. In every shot, she's alone. Entering level 5A, crossing the lane, breaking into a run, hair flying, keys out, door slamming. No one baned, no one near. "See," the officer said, gentle, not patronizing. "You were alone." "Play the audio," she whispered. "Cameras don't record audio in the garage." "Still," he humored her, turning up the volume on the blank track. The speakers hissed, as if the concrete itself was breathing. Then, while the screen showed her sprinting past a pillar with no one behind her, the room filled with footsteps. A perfect echo, half a second late, a chase made out of sound and nothing else. The officer frowned, tapped the speakers off. The steps kept going. They watched, frozen. On screen, she reached her car. Off screen, the footsteps hit the room, crossed the tile, circled behind their chairs, and stopped right at her shoulder. Cold air pushed her hair, as if something leaned in without breath to whisper. The blank monitor bloomed with a new window. Camera, 5A. Stairwell. Unauthorized feed. The officer swore. On this green stairwell door stood ajar. A smear of damp handprints climbed the wall at child height, and then at face height, and then above the camera S-tilt, as if whatever was climbing didn't need stairs after all. "Glitch," the officer said, but his voice had sunk to the soft place people keep for funerals. In the reflection on the dark edge of the monitor framed just glass, Just a black border. They both saw the room behind them. 2 chairs. 1 woman. 1 officer, and a third shape standing between them. Tall enough that its shoulders cropped out of the reflection. Long enough that its arm reached both of their backs. At once. She didn't turn. He didn't either. Behind them, the station's automatic door opened to no one. The lobby camera feed, which also had no audio, picked up a low, wet laugh. The kind a drain makes when it swallows something it was never meant to take. "Do you want me to rewind?" the officer asked. Voiced in. The screen rewound by itself. In reverse, she walked backward into the garage. The door opened to let her out. Her steps unhappened while the other footsteps in the room did not rewind. They moved forward, steady, until they stood behind her chair again. "Ma'am?" the officer said, not taking his eyes off the reflection's empty place where a head should be. "You were alone." Something leaned closer, and for the first time she smelled it. Hot dust and cold pennies, an elevator's throat, the breath of places where sound goes to live after it leaves the body. In the reflection's black edge, a hand finally appeared. Not as light, but as less of it 5 longer than fingers sliding onto her shoulder, settling like it had found home. Her skin didn't feel a touch. The chair creaked anyway. The garage footage ended with her slamming her car door. The off-screen door behind them clicked closed. The train passenger on the North Jersey line. The last car became a rumor with doors. He sat in the forward-facing window seat every night, hands folded, chin down, never blinking, never asking for stops. Conductors called him Sleeping Beauty. Commuters called him Nobody. The glass threw back the city like a bruise, and his reflection never matched the train's sway. One rainy Thursday, an NJ Transit officer boarded at Newark and walked the length of the train. Radio turned low, vest whispering. He reached the last car and tried the handle, locked from the inside. Through the window, the man was their same seat, same angle, eyes open like coins. The officer knocked once. No response. Twice. Nothing. He cupped his hands to the glass. Breath fogged. The man didn't fog. Dispatch crackled. Last car sealed. No scheduled passengers. Proceed to next coach. The officer keyed back. Eyes still on the unmoving figure. Negative visual occupant. He slid his master key into the latch and turned. The lock thunked, heavy and final. The door swung inward on stale, cold air. Empty. No wet footprints. No warmth where a body might have been. The seat's fabric was indented old, not recent, like a habit had worn it down. The officer stepped in and felt the floor list. Not with a train, but slightly off, as if the car were remembering a different track. His radio hissed with a whisper of electric vowels, then cleared. Status. He backed to the door. It clicked behind him, locked again. He was inside now. He walked the aisle, brushing ads for dentists and law firms that fluttered without wind. Overhead the route map gleamed with tiny LEDs. Rahway lit, then dimmed. Linden lit, then dimmed. Names shivering out of sequence. He touched the emergency intercom. The speaker filled with station announcements Laird Rungbay had spoken over Secaucus, the voice stumbling like it had too many tongues. At the far end, the operator's door had a narrow safety window. In darkness, and the faint suggestion of glass, beyond glass, like looking into a mirror, aimed at a mirror. In the reflection, the last car sat lit and empty. Then, slowly, a figure filled the window seat, assembling from the hallway's black. Hands, lap, jaw, eyes. The officer turned around. The seat behind him was still empty. He looked back into the glass. The figure was closer, the angle slightly wrong, as if the car on the other side were pitched uphill. "You good back there?" Dispatch asked. Too bright, too slow. He raised the radio. "Passenger is." He swallowed. The figure in the reflection tilted its head, hearing him through a pane that wasn't there. "Present. The train braked into a small station. The last car's doors did not open. He tried to latch again. Locked. Outside, a tired man in a hoodie jogged down the platform, cupping his eyes to the car's window. He held up a palm, "You okay?" then flinched, stepped back, and hurried away, like he'd seen someone step toward him from inside. When the train pulled out, the officer turned once more to the reflection. The figure now sat where the officer stood, same posture, same radio at the shoulder, but its face was wrong by a fraction, like a photo scanned twice. It lifted a hand. In the real car, the air stirred the officer's hair. He didn't move. "Approach him and get ID." Dispatch sighed. "Platform report says he's unresponsive." The reflection smiled without teeth and reached for the door inside the glass. The officer reached for the real handle out of instinct. Both doors released with a soft click. Something stepped through, no footfalls, just the shape of a person arriving in the space his breath had warmed. The radio popped, and for a second he heard the platform announcements from 3 stations ahead, layered like a song, sung rung in a round. The last car seemed longer now, with more seats than it had, all of them facing a window that didn't look out. He turned to run and smacked into the far door. It didn't give. He looked back down the aisle. The window seat was occupied again, hands folded, chin down, eyes open like coins. He hammered the glass. The conductor opened from the other side at the next stop, cheeks flushed. "Officer," she said, peering in. "You locked in? Thought this car was—" She trailed off. The last car was empty. They tried the door. Locked from the inside. 4 weeks after, late-night commuters said the last car felt heavier, like someone had filled it with a second set of air. If the station lights flickered just right, they'd see a man in uniform riding in the window seat, hands folded, chin down, never blinking. When the train pulled in, the car's doors would not open, and the conductor would shake her head and say, "That coach is sealed after hours." People would laugh, glance anyway, and hurry forward. On a windy night in autumn, a kid on the platform held up his phone to the glass and took a photo. The picture showed an empty car with fog on the windows and a faint imprint on the fabric of the forward seat. Told. Not recent. If you brightened it, you could see the officer in the reflection behind the glass. Halfway turned, mouth open like he was about to say, "Step away from the doors, please." The caption auto-tagged his face with a name that didn't belong to anyone riding the train. The app suggested, "Do you want to add as a friend?" The locked hospital room. They told new hires at St. Marlowe's to ignore the East Wing, where the lights stayed off and the air tasted like old pennies, where room 313 had been padlocked since the day the wing closed in 1995. The story was stupid. Everyone sighed, just steam in the pipes, but sometimes, near to a thin crying would thread down the corridor. Newborn soft. Newborn soft. And the nurses would turn up the TV in the break room until it stopped, on a stormy Thursday, on a fresh-off nights. Too tired to be scared followed. The sound anyway. Her badge wouldn't scan on the security gate. The gate still slid open. The hall beyond was coated in dust like fur. But there were footprints ahead of her, small and bare, crossing back and forth from the wall to 313. As if someone had paced until the dust gave up and settled around the pattern. T-padlock on 313 hung fat and brassy. It was also snapped clean through, edges bent like taffy. No one had cut it. It looked melted. T-door adentebin opened. The hinges were sealed by a line of hospital issue wax. Still, the crying rose and fell. Not frantic, not hungry, but relieved, like a baby who knew the voice leaning over the crib. Aina pressed her ear to the crack. Cold bled through her bones. Inside, a draft. A faint, mechanical hum ventilation, long since powered down, and, underneath it, a woman's breath, counting, the way labor coaches do. 1, 2, 3. Then a weak laugh. "You took your time," the woman whispered. Voice rasped, raw, and familiar enough to lift the hairs along Aina's forearms. "But you found me." Anna stepped back. She knew that voice. Not from the ward, from voicemailer. Mother's last call 6 years ago. Left between chemo rounds when memory had started to fray and time slid. The same tilt to the vowels, the same secret smile at the end of sentences. She deleted those messages the night her mother died, hating the way the hospital made her sound like a stranger. Mom, the word left her without permission. The crying stopped as if someone had put 2 fingers, 2 tiny lips. The wax along the hinge line shivered and depressed, like a hand pressed from the inside. Ana's badge, still clipped to her scrub top, vibrated once against her chest, a little tap, then beeped. The wall panel flashed green. 313's handle turned on its own, a polite 1/4 inch, like a host peeking to see who was at the door. "Anna," the voice said from the dark. Not behind the door anymore, but right against her ear, warm enough to fog the metal. "Don't be late this time." Every light in the dead wing came on at once. The corridor ceiling fixtures stuttered. 10 stadibbed. Beyond the door, another light snapped alive, a surgical white that lifted the dust into snow and showed the room clearly through the gap. There was no crib, no bed, just a tiled floor, a drain, and marks in the grout where a cot had once stood. On the far wall, pinned under cracked laminate, hung a crumpled birth worksheet from 1995. Patient Jane Doe. Infant, female. Time 2:13. Outcome, the paper pulsed against the wall like it was breathing. Anna slid the door wider, just enough to slip an eye in. Something slid back. A pale hand, palm up, the heel creased, with lines she knew. Nail beds beaten yet. Her mother had always kept her hands perfect, even when the rest of her failed. In the center of the palm, nestled like a coin, lay Anna's old hospital bracelet, the one she'd lost at age 5 under a playground bench, printed with her name and a smudged date. "Where did you?" she began, and the crying rose again. Behind the wall, above the ceiling, under her feet, close enough that she felt the sound in her teeth. Monitors in the live wing began chiming at once, a chorus through concrete. Code lights flickered in rooms that no longer existed. The hand curled, the bracelet fell through it, hit the tile on the other side, and rolled in a circle. It settled near the drain, teetered, and tipped clinked into the dark. The crying cut off clean. From deep in the pipes, a newborn took a rattling breath. Aina ran for the charge nurse, words tumbling. "Someone's in 3. The locks, there's a baby," and dragged half the night shift back with crowbars and a complacent security guard. The padlock lay on the floor, whole and bright. Snooga sufficed. The wax line was unbroken. The green light on the panel was dead and dusty. The corridor lights were off. Their footprints had been rubbed away. "Stress," the guard said. "Adio pareidolia, sleep," the charge nurse said softly, not unkindly. "Grief picks." Atold CMs. They walked her back to the break room and poured coffee. Through the wall, deep in the closed wing, something small and wet coughed. At 2:13, every baby monitor in labor and delivery printed a strip of paper with no heart rate, whoosed a steady, identical line of numbers. 330. 313. 313. All the way down. And I went home after sunrise. Shoes leaving clean. Real prints on the concrete. She dumped her scrub pocket into the kitchen sink. Pen, lip balm, badge. Her old hospital bracelet clinked out after them, dripping cold water onto the metal. The ink on her name blurred into a single word. Pending. The disappearing jogger at 5:30 sharp. He'd glide past the same ranch fence in Oregony on windbreaker. Steady breath, no earbuds, never once glancing at the windows that watched him every morning. The man on the porch started timing his coffee to it, the way people time sunrise. One gray morning, curiosity tipped into action. He slipped on boots and fell in behind, keeping the jogger's footfalls as his metronome. They crossed the cul-de-sac, past 2 sleeping mailboxes, and reached the wooded trail that stitched the suburb to a narrow green belt. The jogger never slowed, just cut into the trees as if the trail had invited him by name. The man followed under firs that felt too close for dawn. The air smelled like wet bark and iron. A bend, a dip, a breath. The Dirtha jogger was gone. No side path, no creek to hop, just a tunnel of trees and a trail tamped by hundreds of souls, ending in undisturbed you. The man stood, listening. Not a bird, not a car, just that iron smell, stronger now, like old coins in hot hands. "Hey," he called, voice polite first, then sharp. "You okay?" Silence absorbed his words. Then, from further down the trail where it curved out of sight, came the soft, rhythmic patter of running feet. Exactly the same cadence the jogger had kept for months. He stepped forward, heart hitching only to realize the footprints beside his own were fresh, parallel, and dry, as if someone had been running just out of sight of the rain all night. He rounded the bend and saw the jogger against some windbreaker, same pace moving away along a corridor of trunks, a little too evenly spaced. Relieved, he trotted to close the gap. "Hey man, sorry," he called. "Just wanted to ask." The jogger's head tilted a fraction, hearing. Es load. The man reached out, then the jogger ran straight through a narrow gap between two firs where the space didn't exist. His shoulders slid into bark as if it were fog. The forest exhaled. The jogger kept going, deeper, on a path that wasn't there. The man froze, palm against the tree. The bark was cold, damp, and slick with something that stained his hand. A dark, old red, he told himself, was sap. He pressed harder and his fingertips sank, the texture shifting from bark to felt to skin. A yanked bike stumbling, and felt the trail tilt, just a degree, like a treadmill waking up under his shoes. He turned to run. The trail turned with him. The woods had changed. The trunks now stood like hallway pillars, and the understory had flattened into the suggestion of wallpaper. He realized with a sickness that the trail wasn't dirt at all. Not anymore. It was worn carpet, the color of dead needles, laid runa straight into a vanishing point. Along the edges, waist-high on either side, were handprints pressed into the nap, hundreds of them, all facing forward, as if people had steadied themselves on their way in. Behind him, at the trailhead, something glittered. He looked back and saw his ranch fence, far away and too small, framed perfectly by trees as neat as a doorway. In front, the jogger had stopped at last, just out of reach. He stood with his back turned, chest moving in that slow runner's rise and fall. "Please," the man said, breath shredding. "What is this?" The jogger answered without turning, voice so calm it sounded memorized. "A route. Once you match the pace, the door knows you." "I'm leaving," the man said, and tried to step off the runner into the ferns. His shoe sank up to the ankle with a wet sound, and when he pulled it free, the fern had gripped him back with thin, pale fingers that weren't roots at all. He stumbled, caught himself on the wall, on those pressed handprints, and felt warmth. A pulse. The jogger finally turned. His face wasn't a face. It was the faded negative of one, as if a shape had been worn there by years of wind and repetition. Eyes like two rubbed thin places, a mouth shaped hollow that didn't open when he spoke. "You've watched me," he said. "You know the split times. It's easier if you don't fight." The man ran. For a few seconds he believed he was getting somewhere. The doorway widened. The ranch fence brightened then. The corridor swung like a revolving door and set him back in the same view. The jogger standing just ahead, waiting. The smell of iron thickened. He realized the cadence he'd matched. The 5:30 pace wasn't about distance. It was a key. Panting, shaking, he pulled his phone, jabbed 911. The screen showed a map he didn't recognize, a web of paths, named things like Hollow Run and Evergreen Loop, each looping back into itself. In the selfie cam, the woods behind him stretched miles away, and over his shoulder, a line of people jogged past at 5:30 sharp. All in different clothes, from different decades, all looking straight ahead. He stepped aside to let them pass. They didn't. They threaded through him cold as dawn, their pace never faltering, and each one left a feeling behind. A couch's impression still warm when you return. A front door that swings shut a second too late. The knowledge that someone passed your window at the same minute yesterday and will tomorrow, even if no one lives on your street anymore. The jogger lifted an arm and pointed deeper in, where the runner darkened until it was inky carpet or dirt, but something like a river whose current ran forward. In its surface, he saw his own porch, his own mug. A clock that would forever read 5:29. You just wanted to see, the jogger said. Everyone does. The man looked one last time at the doorway where his house had been, then stepped backward, slow, refusing to blink. He felt the runner take his heels anyway, polite as a hand on the back, guiding him on. At 5:30 the next morning, his neighbor sipped coffee on his own porch and watched a man in a neon windbreaker jog past without looking up. Breath even. Pace perfect. Eyes rubbed, thin by distance. The neighbor thought, I should follow someday, just to see where he goes.